Hey guys, so this will be the Chapter 5 lecture. So here's the learning objectives. We're going to explain how the evaluation of an artwork can change over time and across cultures. We're going to compare formal, contextual, and expressive approaches used in art criticism. Describe the relationship between cash value and artistic quality. Demonstrate an understanding of the factual, analytical, and evaluative steps required when writing about an artwork. Explain censorship as a type of evaluation based on religious, moral, or political values. So, starting off this lecture, how do we tell whether a work of art is good? Is it innovative? Does it move us? Is it skillful? How do viewers evaluate art to determine whether it has quality? Our preferences are about art are often connected to our own personal, deeply held beliefs, so that makes it kind of a tricky it makes it tricky to judge art, really, because we're all different. How a work of art is evaluated varies from person to person and culture to culture. In Mexico, before Spanish conquest, the Aztecs judged art to be good if it resembled the Toltecs, who were the ancient neighboring peoples that the Aztecs really admired, so that's kind of how they judged art. And in China, an artist who showed skill and representation usually would receive poor evaluation because in China, a superior artist was actually one that could communicate the inner spirit or life breath of a subject, so not necessarily representational. In the European tradition, many artists who were celebrated in their own time are definitely forgotten today, and they're victims of changing standards, so time can make a difference, So we're going to actually kind of compare these two pieces here. So we're in comparing these two pieces. Can you tell right off the bat who would have been a leading painter in the 18th century? It's actually quite obvious. It's the one on the right. So Shy Glance is the one on the left, and that's from 1976. It's acrylic on canvas. And Self-Portrait in a Straw Hat is from 1782, oil on canvas. So Shy Glance was actually pulled from a trash bin, and it lacks a lot of technical skill. The artist did not get the shading right on the cheek. As you can see, it's a little blotchy. And it's kind of hard to tell the positive space from the negative space. And then with Self-Portrait in a Straw Hat, the lighting and the brushwork are very naturalistic. The level of technical skill is very high. So these two paintings are at complete opposite when it comes to technical skill. They're at opposite ends of the spectrum. But we may evaluate Shy Glance to actually be more interesting than the other work. And you might ask yourself, why is that? Or how can that be when the technical skill is so poor? Self-Portrait in a Straw Hat is actually, some may view that as actually being rather boring because it's very conventional in how it was painted. Everybody was trying to paint like this, which is basically kind of a very natural, realistic way of painting. And Shy Glance, maybe some people might think it's a little bit more unique. The composition of the piece is definitely unique, with the eye peering out from this curtain of hair. And it's just arranged in a very unique way. And it's obvious the painter does not have very much formal training in painting. So what we find appealing in a piece of art is definitely dependent on what we are looking for personally. So do we like art to dazzle our senses, show great skill, move our feelings, show a version of a better world, bear the soul of the artist, transport us from reality? It all just kind of depends on what you're looking for, really. Personally, I kind of tend to like folk art. My house is full of that. It's done by untrained artists. And I just like seeing what ordinary people like to make. And it has a lot of tradition instilled in it, which I appreciate. And my father was he was a folk artist. He did furniture making. And he was actually a doctor, first and foremost. But he actually did a lot of furniture making. And then my mom was also a folk artist. She did quilting. So that's probably has something to do with it, too. That's why I like it so much. But I think it has a lot of character to it, and it brings art down to a level that I can digest, and it seems attainable to me. And it's not hoity-toity or kind of upper echelon. It's more down to earth. I also like Western style art, like the Old West kind of art, probably because we live in Montana. And there's something about the pride of place and the nostalgia that goes with that type of painting. So that's kind of what I like personally. And you can ask yourself, what do you prefer in art? If you practice seeing instead of just looking at art, it will help you make a more thorough evaluation. So we did talk about seeing and looking versus seeing in an earlier lecture. And we kind of said that seeing is actually a much more deeper process. We see with our memories and our feelings and our emotions. So evaluating art can be a very personal process, and it depends on what we value. So art criticism is different than just your own personal opinion. Art criticism actually is a little bit more structured. So it refers to making judgments, both favorable and unfavorable, of a work of art. So let's see here. So we'll talk about the formal theory of art evaluation, or art criticism, rather. So art critics use 3 ways. There's 3 different ways that they might critique a piece of work. So formal theories focuses attention on the composition of the work and how it shows originality, or how it may have been influenced by other works, or how it influences other artists. So it's all about influence and originality. So contextual theories considers art a product of a culture or a value system. So what's going on at the time in that culture, and how did that affect the art? That's what they're really looking for in the contextual theory of art criticism. So expressive theory of art criticism pay attention to the artist's personality or worldview. So it all has to do, the expressive really has to do with the artists themselves and their personality. So let's start with the formal theory. Critics who use the formal theories look carefully at how the work was actually made. So the parts of the composition, how they come together to create a visual experience. The formal organization of the work is the most important factor in evaluating it in this type of theory, the formal theory. The subject is actually less important than how the artist actually presents it. Innovation in style is very important. It's valued above all. So if they've got some innovative techniques or style that they're using, that's very important in the formal theory. So formal critics always need to know when a work was done so that they compare it with its predecessors and contemporaries. So they want to know the year that a work was done so that they can see if it is revolutionary or innovative. Is the artist doing anything new at that time? These are questions that formal critics would ask themselves. And the only way to tell is if they had the year of the piece to know if they are being innovative in their approach. So, as you may have gathered, in order to do formal critiquing, you need to know a lot about art history. So we're going to take a look at Titian's Pietà. It has innovative brushwork for its time, so they actually know the year of this, so they're able to pinpoint that the brushwork in it is actually very innovative. He's one of the first people that really started to use brushwork in the way that he has. And he understood that his predecessors' methods were different than his, but he still went down his own road to make his brushwork look more painterly, and we'll talk about what that means in a minute. And bold new compositional devices, so he used kind of new ways of arranging his canvas and making his composition different than his predecessors. Okay, so here's Titian's Pietà off on the left here, oil on canvas, so from 1576. So this is considered to be, if we're looking at this in a formal way, from a formal perspective, Titian's Pieta is very innovative in its brushwork. Titian's immediate predecessors in Italian art were the Renaissance masters, Raphael, you may have heard of him, Michelangelo, and Leonardo da Vinci, amongst others. So if we look at Raphael, who's a predecessor to Titian, so somebody that became before him, you can see his style of painting here. It's very smooth, the brushwork is blended, and it's very soft, and he's taken a lot of time to really blend those brushworks in, and each stroke from the brush is, you can't see them. He's completely smoothed them out. So this is Raphael's Paul Preaching to Athens. So this actually came before this painting by Titian. So, and then Titian's is on the left. And Titian understood the painting methods that were popular at that point, the very smooth brushwork used by Raphael and some of his predecessors, but he went beyond this and actually chose to make his brushwork loose and more painterly. You can see the individual brush strokes in this piece. You can see that it's kind of almost like blurry and just a little bit looser of a style. He's not just totally meticulously blending every single brush stroke in. And so that's actually quite innovative at the time, and he does end up influencing artists to create in this way as well. Other artists after this point see this painting and start creating works with more obvious brushstrokes. And then also, even the composition is innovative. The center of the empty niche surrounded by these figures here. So this empty niche here. The fact that it's just this empty niche at the center of the painting is actually kind of a bold compositional device. Most people during this point wouldn't have arranged the canvas in that way. They wouldn't have put this empty area here in the middle. So he's actually using kind of a bold compositional device here. So we're continuing on with the formal theory, same theory, but we're actually going to look at Basquiat's horn players. So he uses techniques learned from graffiti. There's 3 different panels, but they are kind of made in a way where they look like one solid panel almost. So they don't look like separate paintings. And it may look improvised, but it's actually a result of discipline. So he was a Brooklyn artist, and this is from 1983. It's called Horn Players, and it's acrylic and oil paint sticks on 3 separate canvas panels, and they're quite large, 8 feet tall by total 6.5 feet wide. So this presents interesting formal innovations. First, he created it using techniques he learned from making graffiti. So he lived in New York, so that kind of makes sense. Few other artists were doing. So second, the division into 3 vertical panels is interesting because the artist successfully avoided the pitfall of making the work seem like 3 separate paintings. So he actually kind of counteracted the division of these 3 panels and held the work together by repeating certain motifs across the panels, such as the head. So here's a head here, here's a head here, here's a head here. So that use of that repetition helps create unity in the 3 panels. So the patches of white also do that. So there's patches of color that are very similar in each panel, help to kind of bring the composition together and unify the 3 panels. And also the words in the boxes helps too. So like the soap word here, ornithology, he does it here too. So alchemy here. So that kind of, those repeating patterns and motifs helps to, and shapes and colors helps to really unify the piece. And it may look like it's improvised at first glance, yet he brought discipline to the work, creating unity and variety. And so on a in a formal way, he was actually quite innovative. He is bringing graffiti into art and fine art, and really, he's one of the first people to do that. And he actually does influence people down the line.